My name is Lily Parker. I'm 29 years old, and until a few months ago, I thought I understood what family meant. I believed in loyalty, in fairness, in love that didn't come with terms and conditions. But that illusion shattered the day I found out my parents handed over the family company, the very company I spent my entire adult life helping to build, to my sister without a single conversation. No warning, no explanation, just betrayal. But let me take you back to where it really started. Before the anger, before the tears, before I made the decision that would change everything. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're still here. This story's just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. I was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, the second daughter of Diane and Edward Parker, founders of Parker & Sons Textiles, a manufacturing company that had grown from a tiny warehouse on the edge of town into a nationwide supplier of premium fabric. Ironically, despite the name, there were no sons in our family, only me and my older sister, Amanda. But traditions die hard in the South, and my father always said the name had a stronger ring to it. From the time I was 12, I watched my parents work tirelessly. While Amanda was off at her tennis camps or flirting with college boys at prep schools, I sat in the office organizing files, helping my mom with inventory, or shadowing my dad during supplier meetings. I loved it. I loved the energy, the drive, the feeling of creating something real with my own two hands. I didn't need to be asked. I volunteered. I practically grew up in that office. By the time I graduated college, I didn't even hesitate. I turned down a lucrative offer from a corporate firm in New York and walked straight into Parker & Sons, sleeves rolled up and ready to work. At first, my parents seemed thrilled. They gave me a small team to lead and let me launch a digital branch for online sales, which ended up doubling our revenue in under a year. I was proud, not just of myself, but of what we were building as a family. Amanda, on the other hand, had taken a different route. She'd married young, divorced twice, dabbled in real estate, and briefly tried to become an influencer. She rarely came to the office, and when she did, it was to request money or complain about how boring everything looked. She didn't understand the company, nor did she care to. And yet, somehow, she was always the favorite. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I didn't need recognition as long as I was making a difference. But the truth? The truth is, that imbalance started eating away at me slowly. Every time Amanda showed up late to a family dinner and still got all the attention. Every time I made a major breakthrough at work and barely got a nod. Every time my mother compared my blouse to something Amanda had worn 10 years ago and said hers looked more expensive. Still, I kept my head down. I worked late hours. I gave up vacations. I helped modernize the logistics and bring in younger clients. My father began referring to me as the heart of the company. At least that's what he told others. But behind closed doors, things were never quite that clear. 3 months ago, everything changed. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had just wrapped up a massive client pitch that went better than expected. I was humming to myself in the office kitchen when I overheard something that would derail everything. My parents were in the conference room. They thought I had left early. The door was slightly ajar, and I heard my name. "She'll understand," my mother was saying. "Lily's always been practical. She won't cause a scene." "Still," my father replied, voice low and hesitant, "it feels wrong not to tell her. She's earned—" "We agreed," my mother cut in sharply. "Amanda needs the structure. If we give her the company, she'll finally have direction. Lily will be fine. She's independent, strong. She doesn't need this." I stood there, frozen. My coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile floor. They heard the crash and rushed out, faces pale and guilty. I didn't even wait for them to speak. I walked out without a word. That weekend, I packed a suitcase and drove 2 hours out to Asheville to stay with my best friend Rachel. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even talk much. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the last 10 years of my life like a broken film reel. I had given them everything, and in the end, they didn't even think I deserved a conversation. My sister, who hadn't worked a full week in years, was apparently more in need than I was. That's what it came down to. Not merit, not sacrifice, but pity, image, favoritism. It was in that silence, somewhere between rage and heartbreak, that something shifted inside me. I would not let this be the end of my story. If they wanted to cast me aside, I'd let them. But not quietly, not gently. I wasn't going to beg for scraps from the table I helped build. I was going to take action. Rachel noticed the change in me that night. We were sitting on her porch when I finally spoke. "I'm not going back," I told her. "Not the same way. I'll smile, I'll play along. But they made a choice. Now I'll make mine." She looked at me with a mix of concern and curiosity. "What are you going to do?" I took a sip of wine, eyes focused on the dark horizon. "I'm going to show them what happens when you bet everything on the wrong daughter." It wasn't about revenge at first. It was about clarity, dignity. But the deeper I went, the more I uncovered, and the more I realized that Amanda hadn't just taken something that should have been mine. She had planned it. And that's when my plan began. When I returned to Charlotte the following Monday, I walked into the office with my head high and a soft smile on my face, as if nothing had happened. My mother greeted me at the door with a forced grin and a tone that tried too hard to sound normal. My father couldn't even meet my eyes. Amanda wasn't there, of course. She never was on Mondays. She said they were her reset days. Ironic, considering I was about to reset everything without her knowing. For the next few weeks, I played the part. I didn't ask questions. I didn't mention what I had heard. Instead, I took careful notes. I watched the people around me. I listened. I studied. And slowly, I began uncovering pieces that confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. Amanda had been scheming for months, probably even longer. It started with her sudden interest in the company's leadership meetings. At first, she'd show up late and say she was just observing. Then she started making bold suggestions, half-baked ideas that sounded impressive but lacked any substance. Still, my parents encouraged her. They said she had potential and needed a platform. They handed her small responsibilities: community outreach, social media, supplier relations. Most of it ended in disaster, but they smoothed it over. And while I was the one cleaning up the messes behind the scenes, Amanda was praised for trying. Then came the board restructuring. My father had always been the chairman, but a few months back, they brought in 2 outside consultants to advise on the future direction of Parker & Sons. At the time, I didn't think much of it. They said it was part of a long-term plan to modernize the company and improve governance. What they didn't tell me was that Amanda had introduced them, her contacts from some startup networking group she'd joined. Digging a little deeper, I discovered emails. One of the IT guys owed me a favor, and I asked him to pull old archived messages that had been deleted from shared folders. What I found made my stomach turn. My mother had been coordinating with Amanda behind the scenes. The emails were full of manipulative language, phrases like "Lily doesn't need to know," "she'll adapt," and "we'll present it as a family decision." There was even a draft of a press release naming Amanda the new CEO, effective immediately upon announcement. I felt sick. I wanted to confront them all, to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't just going to react. I was going to be deliberate. So I began building my own team. There were people in the company who respected me, not because I was a Parker, but because I showed up, worked hard, and treated them like human beings. I started pulling them in one by one, under the pretense of a new project initiative. I used corporate language and vague references to innovation. They bought in. They trusted me. Rachel, my best friend from Asheville, had a cousin who worked in corporate law. I met with her in secret and explained the situation. She advised me to begin documenting everything, every decision, every transfer of assets, every internal memo that suggested favoritism or misconduct. She also suggested that I explore my stake in the company. Although I wasn't listed as an executive shareholder, I had signed several agreements over the years tied to my performance and development projects. There was a paper trail that might give me leverage. I followed every breadcrumb. Then, something unexpected happened. Amanda approached me. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was reviewing financials in the glass conference room when she strolled in like she owned the place. Her heels clicked across the tile, echoing louder than necessary. She didn't knock. "Hey, little sis," she said, voice sugary sweet. "Got a minute?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sure. What's up?" She sat down, crossed her legs, and leaned back with a smirk. "So, Mom and Dad finally told you?" I didn't flinch. "Told me what?" "That I'm taking over," she said with a casual shrug, like it was no big deal. "Don't worry. You'll still have your little department. I mean, I'm not going to fire you. That would be cruel." I studied her, wondering how someone could be so shameless. She wasn't just proud of what she'd done. She was enjoying it. "What makes you think you're ready to lead this company?" I asked quietly. She rolled her eyes. "Please, Lily, I don't need to know how every spreadsheet works. That's what people like you are for. I'm the face, the brand, the connection to the modern market." "You mean the TikTok videos with bad lighting and half-baked slogans?" She smiled wider. "Oh, come on. You always were so serious. Maybe it's time for Parker and Sons to evolve. Besides, they chose me. That has to count for something." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. She stood up, smoothed her skirt, and tossed her hair over her shoulder. "Anyway, just wanted to give you a heads up. We're making the announcement next month. You should prepare." And just like that, she was gone. But now I had confirmation. Her arrogance was my greatest weapon. She'd tipped her hand, and I was ready to play mine. That night, I stayed late at the office. I logged into the internal network and pulled every single contract I had signed over the last decade. I reviewed employment clauses, project bonuses, and investment agreements. I discovered 3 distinct documents that tied my work to long-term equity shares. Clauses my parents had likely forgotten or assumed I'd never pursue. But I did. I had just enough ownership to call a shareholder meeting. Quietly, I began aligning allies. I reached out to Mr. Wallace, a retired VP who still held a minor stake in the company. He had always liked me and hated the direction things were headed. I convinced him to support a motion for temporary review of executive decisions. Then I met with 2 of the regional managers who had shares from their bonus programs. I laid out the facts, the favoritism, the restructuring, the risk. I didn't ask them to oppose Amanda. I asked them to protect the company. Within 2 weeks, I had the signatures I needed. The meeting was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. My parents were furious when they found out. My father called me into his office the night before. "Lily, what are you doing?" he asked, voice tight. "This is a family matter. You don't need to involve the board." "I am the board," I said simply, "or part of it. And I have every right to question how decisions are made when they affect the future of everything I've helped build." He looked old, tired, and sad. "This isn't you." I leaned forward. "No, Dad. This is the version of me that watched you hand everything to someone who didn't earn it. This is the version that's done playing nice." He said nothing, just looked down at the floor. I walked out without waiting for more. The next day, the conference room was filled. Amanda showed up late, of course, wearing a white blazer and oversized sunglasses indoors. She acted surprised to see the shareholder docket on the table. "What's this?" she whispered to our mother. My mother didn't reply. She just looked straight ahead. I stood, cleared my throat, and began my presentation. I laid out the timeline, the decisions made without proper consultation, the risks involved in placing the company under inexperienced leadership, the existing agreements that gave me stake and voice. I didn't attack Amanda personally, not once. I focused on facts, on patterns, on what was best for Parker and Sons. When I was done, the room was silent. Then Mr. Wallace stood and spoke. Then the others followed. What they said didn't surprise me, but Amanda's reaction did. She stood, threw her binder on the table, and shouted, "This is a setup. You're jealous because they picked me." I looked her in the eye and smiled. "No, Amanda, I'm not jealous. I'm just finally taking what I earned." And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't the end of the battle. It was only the beginning. In the days that followed the shareholder meeting, the energy around the company shifted. People were quieter in the hallways, more cautious in conversation. Rumors began to float from office to office, like smoke before a fire. No formal announcement had been made about Amanda's promotion, And now, with my motion for oversight in place, the leadership vacuum was clear. Tension gripped the building like a storm about to break. I could feel it in every whispered conversation, every stiff smile, every long glance exchanged between department heads. But something else changed too. Something inside me. For so long, I had operated from a place of loyalty. I believed in the company because I believed in what it represented: family, legacy, hard work. But now that illusion had been stripped away, and what was left behind wasn't weakness. It was clarity. I realized that if I truly wanted justice, if I wanted to rewrite the ending of this story, I had to stop waiting for things to return to normal. There was no going back to what we once were. There was only forward. And I had to lead that march. Amanda didn't take her defeat quietly. After the meeting, she launched a subtle campaign to undermine me. She began meeting with the junior staff behind my back, painting herself as the victim of a cold, calculated coup. She told anyone who would listen that I had manipulated the board, used ancient documents to claw my way into power. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. Her words were venomous, but they didn't sting the way they once might have. Because now, I had something stronger than hurt. I had evidence. A few days after the meeting, I received an anonymous email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You should see this." Attached was a PDF containing a series of financial statements, some of which bore Amanda's digital signature. At first glance, they looked like routine expenses, marketing campaigns, consulting fees, vendor payments. But something was off. The vendors didn't exist. The payments had been routed to shell accounts, and the timeline matched her brief stint managing our supplier relations department. It was embezzlement. Clean, bold, and hidden just beneath the surface. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. If this got out, Amanda wouldn't just lose her position, she could face criminal charges. But I knew what this meant. Someone on the inside had turned against her. She wasn't as untouchable as she thought. I forwarded the documents to Rachel's cousin, the corporate attorney, and asked her to verify everything. Within 2 days, she confirmed the worst. Amanda had funneled over $120,000 into a personal account over the course of 8 months. My parents had no idea. She'd used administrative logins and transferred the funds in small amounts to avoid detection. The arrogance, the carelessness, the entitlement. I had her. But something inside me hesitated. Not out of pity. No. Amanda had made her choices, but I wanted this to be about justice, not destruction. I didn't want to ruin her for the sake of revenge. I wanted to hold her accountable for the rot she had brought into something I had spent years trying to preserve. And more importantly, I wanted to protect the company. So I made a choice. I arranged a private meeting with my parents. Not at the office, but at our family home in Myers Park. The same home where we'd celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and countless holidays. I wanted them to understand the weight of what had happened, not just through spreadsheets and legal documents, but face to face. When I arrived, the house felt colder than usual. My father greeted me at the door, his eyes weary, his frame a little more hunched than I remembered. My mother was seated in the living room, dressed impeccably as always, though her expression was distant. "I assume you're not here for dinner," she said without looking at me. "I'm here to tell you the truth," I replied. I handed them the folder containing the documents and watched as they read in silence. My father's lips parted slightly. My mother's brow tightened with each turn of the page. When they reached the final sheet, I spoke again. "She didn't just lie to you. She stole from the company. From us. And if this goes public, it won't just be her reputation on the line. It'll be Parker & Sons. Everything you built." My mother finally looked up. "You've been digging through her past?" "No, I've been protecting your future." She pressed her fingers to her temple. My father cleared his throat. "Lily, we didn't know. I believe you," I said softly. "But now you do. And you have a choice." My mother's voice was flat. "You want her out. I want the company to survive. I want it to thrive under leadership that cares, that works, that doesn't treat it like a piggy bank. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for what's right." They were quiet for a long time. Eventually, my father nodded. We'll take it to the board. No, I said. It needs to come from you. The founders. A public statement. You acknowledge the mistake, remove her quietly, and let me take the reins. With full authority. My mother flinched. You want to humiliate her. I want to save what's left. The silence that followed was heavy. I stood and walked to the door. You have 2 days, I said, my voice calm but firm. After that, I take it to the shareholders and the authorities. When I left the house, my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the gravity of what I'd just done. I had drawn a line, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of standing on the other side of it alone. That night, I returned to the office late. The halls were empty, the glow of the city filtering in through the windows. I walked through the departments I'd helped build, the spaces I'd poured myself into for nearly a decade. I thought about the people who worked here, who depended on Parker and Sons to feed their families, build their futures. They deserved better, and I would be the one to give it to them. At midnight, I received a text from my father. We'll release the statement tomorrow. It's time. I stared at the message for a long time, the words blurring slightly from the welling in my eyes. Not sadness, not even relief, just a deep, quiet resolve. The next morning, the company issued a press release. It was professional, polished, and brief. Amanda Parker had resigned from her position to pursue personal endeavors. The board had named Lily Parker as interim CEO during the transition. There would be no further comment at this time. Amanda didn't show up to the office. I heard from one of her friends that she'd left town. Apparently, she booked a flight to Miami and checked into a luxury resort. She posted a photo with the caption, "Sometimes you have to let the haters talk while you live your best life." But I wasn't watching anymore. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken louder than her captions ever could. I moved into the executive office that afternoon. It smelled like leather and old decisions. I replaced the portraits on the wall with photographs of the staff, team outings, and moments that mattered. I opened the blinds, let in the light, and sat in the chair that had once felt unreachable. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was taking something that wasn't mine. I felt like I was home. The first weeks after becoming interim CEO were the hardest I had ever faced. Not because of the work, I knew the company inside out. I had overseen major deals, launched new product lines, saved departments from collapse. But now, the weight of legacy sat entirely on my shoulders. I wasn't just fixing broken pieces anymore. I was rebuilding trust, rewriting culture, and healing a system that had been quietly bleeding for years. There were eyes on me everywhere, some hopeful, some skeptical. A few employees, especially those loyal to Amanda, avoided me entirely. I could sense the undercurrent of doubt, the whispered questions. Is she strong enough? Is she just here because her sister's gone? But I didn't let it break me. If anything, it pushed me harder. I started showing up before anyone else. I walked the floors, talked to the team, learned their names if I didn't know them already. I didn't hide behind closed doors or PowerPoint slides. I stood beside the people who had kept this company running while the higher-ups played politics. I made it clear, this wasn't going to be business as usual. It was going to be personal. It was going to be real. One of the first decisions I made was to dissolve the shadow committee Amanda had created under the guise of innovation. It was a group of her personal allies who had been funneling resources into pet projects that never produced results. I reallocated that budget into employee development, offering workshops, mentorship programs, and performance-based incentives. The shift was immediate. People started smiling again. Productivity rose. Absenteeism dropped. The heart of Parker and Sons was beating stronger, steadier, but not everything was smooth. One afternoon, about a month into my new role, I found a note slipped under my office door. It was handwritten on yellow legal paper. No name, just the words, "She's coming back. Be ready." I stared at it for a long time, the weight of those 7 words pressing into my chest like a stone. I knew Amanda wouldn't disappear forever. People like her didn't vanish. They circled. They waited. They plotted. I didn't tell anyone about the note. Instead, I focused on fortifying everything Amanda had once weakened. I called in a security audit to prevent future data leaks. I hired a new head of finance, someone with no ties to our family. I reviewed contracts, restructured teams, met with legal to ensure there were no remaining vulnerabilities. Still, the unease lingered. Late one night, I was in the break room heating up leftover lasagna when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there was my mother, standing in the doorway with a soft expression that felt foreign after months of tension. "I didn't think I'd find you here," she said. "This place is home," I replied, without looking at her. She stepped forward, hesitating like someone crossing a thin sheet of ice. "I wanted to talk about Amanda." I placed the container on the counter and leaned against the sink. "There's not much left to say. She's struggling, Lily. She feels like we all abandoned her." "She abandoned herself," I said calmly. "You just gave her the tools to do it." Her face tightened, but she didn't argue. For the first time, I saw a flicker of shame behind her eyes. "We made mistakes. I made mistakes." I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. "I'm not asking you to forgive her," she continued. "I'm asking you not to let this bitterness consume you. You've won. You're here. You're leading. Don't let her shadow follow you forever." I wanted to yell. I wanted to remind her that Amanda's choices weren't just cruel. They were calculated. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I saw my mother not as a manipulator, but as a woman terrified of losing both daughters. And that, more than anything, made me ache. "I'm not bitter," I said finally. "I'm building something she never cared to." "That's not revenge. That's responsibility." She nodded slowly and turned to leave. At the doorway, she paused. "You're more like your father than you think." I didn't answer. Over the next few weeks, Parker and Sons began to feel different. Lighter. Stronger. The walls that once echoed with power plays now buzzed with creativity. Teams collaborated more freely. Clients noticed the difference too. We signed 2 new contracts with major retail chains, deals Amanda never would have known how to land. Every time I walked through the office, I felt a flicker of pride I'd long been denied. Still, the note never left my mind. I kept it hidden in a drawer under my desk, unfolding it from time to time like a warning from a fortune teller. I didn't know when Amanda would return, or how, but I knew she wasn't finished, and I wasn't afraid. One morning, I found a new email in my inbox. No subject. Just a link. I clicked it and was taken to a video on a private channel. Amanda appeared on screen, dressed in all black, sitting in front of a sterile white wall. She looked serious, poised. It wasn't one of her typical flashy rants. This was calculated. "I know many of you think you know what happened," she began. "You've heard Lily's side, but there's more to this story." She went on to claim that I had used old legal tricks to force her out, that I had framed her for financial missteps she hadn't authorized, and that the board had been manipulated by fear. She said she was planning to launch her own company, Parker Innovations, a direct competitor to ours. She ended with a chilling smile. "Lily, if you're watching this, I'm just getting started." I closed the browser and leaned back in my chair, heartbeat steady. I didn't need to panic. I didn't need to match her theatrics, because I had already won the only battle that mattered: the truth. The people in my company knew who I was. They knew what I stood for. Amanda could build whatever she wanted out there, but it would be hollow. A copy without the soul. A brand without the backbone. Still, I prepared. I briefed our legal department. I called a meeting with our executive team. I explained the situation transparently, laying out the facts and assuring them that we would not stoop to personal attacks. We would stay focused, professional, united. And to my surprise, they rallied around me. Not because they feared Amanda, but because they trusted me. Because they believed in the vision I had outlined. And they wanted to be part of it. That was the day I stopped seeing myself as interim. That was the day I became the leader I was always meant to be. On the anniversary of my father's retirement, we held a company-wide celebration in the main atrium. I stood at the front, microphone in hand, and looked out at the faces of people who had stood by me through chaos, silence, and fire. "I know this hasn't been an easy year," I said. "But sometimes it's in the breaking that we find our true shape. I want to thank each of you, not just for staying, but for building this new chapter with me. We've been tested, we've been challenged, and we've proven that we're more than a name. We're a force. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was grounding. It reminded me that legacy isn't just about bloodlines or boardrooms. It's about actions, choices, integrity. Later that night, I stood alone in my office, the city lights shimmering beyond the glass. I pulled out the yellow note and held it for the last time. Then I walked to the shredder and fed it through slowly, watching the warning dissolve into strips. She was coming back. Let her. Because now, I was ready. Amanda's return was quieter than I expected. No dramatic confrontation, no screaming in the lobby, no PR blitz, just a whisper that reached me one morning through an assistant. She's in town. At first, I didn't react. I kept working, reviewing quarterly numbers and finalizing a contract with one of our new eco-sustainable partners. But beneath the calm surface, every muscle in my body was alert, not afraid, just aware. Amanda was never quiet without a purpose. If she was back, she was planning something. 2 days later, I found out what it was. I had just stepped out of a conference call when my legal advisor, Janelle, rushed into my office, her face pale and stiff. She handed me a manila envelope marked urgent. Inside were printed documents, filed with the Mecklenburg County Court. Amanda had filed a civil lawsuit against me, claiming defamation, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraudulent manipulation of the board. She was asking for damages, public correction of the company's leadership decision, and, in bold, immediate reinstatement of her position. The room didn't spin, my stomach didn't drop, but a cold fury settled in my chest. She wasn't just trying to tarnish me, she was trying to erase everything I had worked for. And she was doing it with the same arrogance she had always carried, believing that if she barked loud enough, someone would give her what she wanted. But this wasn't the family dinner table anymore. This was war, and I had spent a year building armor. Janelle sat across from me and went through the lawsuit point by point. Most of it was exaggerated, some of it was false, and a few parts were outright laughable. But the danger wasn't in the claims themselves. It was in the noise they created, the distraction, the possibility of doubt spreading among clients and employees. Amanda didn't need to win. She just needed to make things messy. I refused to let that happen. We filed a counterclaim within 48 hours, not just denying her accusations, but presenting our evidence in full. Emails, financial records, board transcripts, and testimony from team members who had seen firsthand the damage she had caused. I held a company-wide meeting and spoke openly about the lawsuit. No spin. No fear, just truth. I will not let lies define this company or my leadership, I said, my voice steady. We are stronger than this, and we are not going back. The response was overwhelming. People stood, clapped, some even cried. It wasn't just support, it was defiance. Amanda may have wanted to shake the foundation, but all she did was tighten the walls. Still, the legal process moved forward. Depositions began. Witnesses were called. I sat across from Amanda in a sterile conference room for 7 hours as lawyers asked questions, recorded statements, and pushed paper after paper across the table. She wore a navy suit and a smug expression that cracked only once. When they asked her to explain the shell companies she had routed money through, she stammered, claimed it was an outsourcing strategy, but the evidence was clear. Her mask slipped, and behind it, I saw panic. The court date was set for 2 months later. In the meantime, I kept the company running like nothing had changed. I didn't want Amanda to win, but more than that, I didn't want her to matter. I refused to build my days around her shadow. I focused on the expansion project in Texas, the launch of our new biodegradable fabric line, and the mentorship program I had started for young women in the textile industry. But I knew the courtroom would be the final stage. When the day arrived, I wore a charcoal suit and no jewelry. I didn't want to shine. I wanted to speak. Amanda arrived with 2 lawyers and a camera crew she had hired to document her journey. Typical. She smiled at me in the hallway like we were walking into a brunch instead of a legal reckoning. I didn't smile back. The courtroom was small, clean, cold. The judge, a sharp woman in her 50s, read through the case file like it was just another Tuesday. Amanda's lawyer went first. He painted her as a visionary, a misunderstood innovator who had been pushed out by a jealous sibling. He used words like creative tension and executive misalignment. I listened without blinking. When it was our turn, Janelle stood and walked the court through the timeline. Every project I led, every performance report, every vote of confidence from the board. Then she unveiled the embezzlement evidence, bank records, company emails, witness statements. Amanda shifted in her seat, her fingers tightening around her pen. Then I was called to testify. I took the stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. And then I spoke. I didn't rage, I didn't cry. I told the story, not just of betrayal, but of resilience. I explained how I had poured my youth into the company, how I had built programs, led teams, and saved entire departments from collapse. I acknowledged my sister's pain, but I exposed her pattern of entitlement, her disregard for structure, and her deliberate manipulation of our family. I didn't want this fight, I said, but I will not apologize for defending what I earned. This company is not a toy. It's not a social project. It's a legacy, and I intend to protect it. The room was silent. Amanda was called to the stand next. She played her part. Tears, dramatic pauses, vague references to childhood trauma and sibling rivalry. But the facts betrayed her. Her answers were inconsistent, her attitude arrogant. When the judge asked about the fraudulent payments, Amanda deflected, then blamed an assistant who had already submitted a written statement denying involvement. It unraveled fast. By the end of the trial, the judge didn't even hesitate. She ruled in our favor on all counts. Amanda's lawsuit was dismissed. Our counterclaim stood. Amanda was ordered to pay legal fees and issue a formal retraction of her accusations. She stormed out before the ruling was finished. I walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, blinking at the sky. Rachel was waiting by the steps. She didn't say anything, just hugged me, tight and real. I didn't realize until then that I had been holding my breath for almost a year, and now I could finally exhale. That night, I didn't celebrate with champagne or speeches. I went home, took off my heels, and sat on the floor of my living room with a glass of water. I looked around at the quiet, the stillness, the peace, and for the first time in months, I felt something warm spread through my chest. Not victory, not revenge, closure. The war Amanda started was over. She lost, and I survived not just because I fought harder, but because I never stopped building. While she schemed, I worked. While she blamed, I listened. While she demanded, I created. Now, the future was mine, and I was just getting started. After the trial, a silence settled over everything. Not the silence of tension or unease, but the silence of things finally finding their place. There were no more anonymous threats, no new smear campaigns. Amanda's name stopped appearing in news alerts. It was as if the storm that had loomed over the company for months had passed, leaving behind not destruction, but room to rebuild. And I was ready. The following week, the board of directors held a private session, and this time there was no debate, no backroom negotiation. The vote was unanimous. I was named the official CEO of Parker & Sons. No more interim, no more pretending I was just holding the spot. It was mine now, entirely, completely. And this time, not because of birthright or manipulation or someone pulling strings behind the curtain. I had earned it, word by word, meeting by meeting, hour by hour. I had built my own foundation, and now I stood on it without apology. Still, I didn't announce the title right away. I didn't plaster it across the company website or post a congratulatory message on social media. Instead, I walked into work the next morning like I always had, early, focused, steady. People greeted me with quiet smiles and firm nods. They knew, and that was enough. I spent the next several months transforming the company from the inside out. I restructured the leadership pipeline, ensuring that promotions were based on merit, not connections. I invited younger voices into strategic meetings, fresh perspectives that had long been ignored in favor of seniority. We launched a partnership with a local university to bring in interns from underserved communities. and we offered full scholarships to the best performers. I called it the Legacy Initiative, not just because it sounded strong, but because I finally understood what legacy meant. It wasn't about keeping the business in the bloodline. It was about creating something that outlasted you, something better than what you inherited. The company began to thrive again. Profits increased, but more importantly, morale soared. Employees who once kept their heads down now spoke openly during meetings. Managers who had been on the verge of quitting renewed their contracts. Clients who had paused their partnerships during the drama returned, bringing even more business with them. Word spread that Parker & Sons was no longer just a family-run company stuck in the past. It was becoming something different, something modern, resilient, human. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud not just of what we were doing, but of who I was becoming. My parents eventually returned to the office, though things between us had changed. My mother no longer tried to steer decisions from the sidelines, and my father, though quieter than before, began to look at me with something new in his eyes. Not just love, but respect. We didn't speak much about Amanda. She had moved to New York, started a small online retail business, and stayed out of the spotlight. I heard through a former assistant that she was struggling to keep investors. Apparently, people weren't lining up to fund someone with her reputation. Still, I didn't wish her failure. I didn't wish her anything. My story didn't revolve around her anymore. One afternoon in early spring, my father invited me to lunch at a small cafe near the office. We hadn't done that in years, not just the two of us. We sat on the patio under a wide umbrella, and for a while, we talked about simple things. The weather, the new renovations, a mutual friend's retirement. Then he grew quiet, tapping his fingers on the table like he always did when something was on his mind. "You know," he said finally, "when your mother and I started this company, we didn't know what we were doing. We just knew we wanted something that was ours, something that could take care of the family. You did that," I said softly. He nodded. "We tried, but somewhere along the way we confused taking care of the family with protecting the image of the family. And that's where we failed you." I looked at him, unsure of what to say. "I'm proud of you, Lily. I've always been proud. I just didn't say it enough, and I didn't listen when I should have." Hearing those words cracked something open inside me. I didn't realize how much I'd needed them. Not for validation, but for healing. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "We all made mistakes," I said, "but we're still here, and that counts for something." After that, something shifted between us. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the years of imbalance or the ways I'd been overlooked, but it was a start. A real one. We started meeting monthly to review long-term goals. He offered guidance when I asked, but never pushed. My mother even began volunteering with one of the community programs we launched, mentoring young women in entrepreneurship. She said it helped her see things differently. Maybe it did. One evening, I stayed late at the office finishing a proposal for a new international expansion. The building was quiet, just the hum of machines and the soft glow of hallway lights. I walked the halls, pausing outside each department, remembering the struggles we'd been through to keep those rooms full. The quiet felt different now, not lonely, peaceful. I made my way to the large glass window in the executive lounge, overlooking the city. Charlotte sparkled beneath me, familiar yet alive with possibility. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who worked late for approval that never came, the one who overheard a conversation and thought her world had ended, the one who walked away with nothing but her pride and came back with a plan. She didn't know how strong she was, but I did now. I turned off the lights and left the office, locking the door behind me. The night air was crisp, filled with the scent of jasmine from a nearby planter. I pulled out my phone and opened the last photo I had taken at my desk, a shot of the plaque with my name, Lily Parker, Chief Executive Officer. I smiled, not because of the title, but because of everything it meant. Every step, every scar, every choice. And in that stillness, I understood something I hadn't before. Vengeance isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with fire or fury. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, unshakable. Sometimes vengeance is showing up, doing the work, taking what they said you didn't deserve, and building something better with it. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't watching them fall. It's watching yourself rise. It's been 3 years since the trial, and sometimes I still wake up expecting to feel the weight of it all pressing against my chest. But then I open my eyes, stretch beneath warm sheets, and look out the window at a skyline I helped protect. Not with anger, but with persistence. And I remember, I'm not living in the aftermath anymore. I'm living in the future I built. Parker & Sons is no longer just the name on the building. It's a symbol of resilience. We've expanded into 5 new states, opened 2 international offices, and signed a major deal with a global fashion brand that now uses our sustainable fabrics in their entire spring and summer lines. But none of those milestones shine brighter to me than the things that never made headlines. Like when we created the Employee Wellness Grant for staff to pursue their passions outside of work, painting, writing, travel. Or when one of our interns, Maya, whom I mentored personally, became the youngest department lead in company history. Or the day a father who worked in our production department told me that, for the first time in years, he didn't dread coming to work because he felt seen. These are the victories no one claps for at board meetings, but they're the ones I carry with me. I live differently now, too. Not in luxury or excess. I've never needed that. But in freedom. I moved out of the apartment that used to sit just 20 minutes from the office and bought a small house on the edge of town. It's quiet, full of natural light and bookshelves, and the backyard opens into a small field where I planted 2 cherry blossom trees last spring. They haven't bloomed yet, but I know they will. Things take time to grow. I've learned to be patient. Every morning, I wake up early and take a walk before checking my emails. I stop by the same cafe on Tuesdays, where the barista already knows my order. 1 green tea, 1 blueberry scone. I smile more, not because life is perfect, but because I stopped expecting it to be. I still have hard days. I still feel the sting of old wounds when something reminds me of what used to be. But the pain has dulled into perspective. I hear from Amanda now and then. Not directly, but through quiet channels. Her online business collapsed a year after it launched. Investors pulled out. Her second rebrand didn't go well. Then she tried a podcast, which lasted 3 episodes before disappearing. From what I understand, she's back in Charlotte now, working freelance design gigs, living in a condo downtown. I haven't seen her since the courthouse. Part of me thought we might bump into each other in a grocery store aisle or pass on a sidewalk. But that moment never came, and I stopped waiting for it. She never apologized. But that's all right. Some people never do. Some people spend their lives running from mirrors, terrified of what they might see. And maybe that's her burden to carry now, not me. As for my parents, things have grown tender again, though not entirely the same. My father retired fully last year, handing over the last of his advisory duties to the board. He spends his time traveling with my mother, who has mellowed with age and experience. They call often. We have dinner once a month. We don't talk about Amanda unless I bring her up, and even then it's brief. There are still cracks in the foundation, but we're not pretending anymore. And that honesty has brought us closer than the performance ever did. A few months ago, I was invited to speak at a business conference in San Diego. They asked me to talk about leadership, resilience, and how to thrive through adversity. I stood on that stage in front of hundreds of executives, investors, students. And for the first time, I told the story publicly, not with bitterness, but with truth. I spoke of loyalty misplaced, of lessons earned through heartbreak. I talked about the power of staying when it's easier to walk away, and the grace it takes to rebuild something that others tried to tear down. I didn't say Amanda's name. I didn't need to. The point wasn't who hurt me. The point was who I became because of it. After the talk, a young woman approached me in tears. She had just been passed over for a promotion she'd worked years for. The job went to someone less qualified, someone with family ties to the board. She said my story gave her hope that maybe she didn't have to leave to prove her worth. Maybe she could stay and fight, with wisdom, not rage. I gave her my card and told her to call me if she ever needed someone to talk to. She did. We spoke last week. She's starting her own company. Sometimes I think about how differently things could have gone. If I had walked away after that night in the office when I overheard my parents, if I had let that betrayal convince me I wasn't enough, if I had believed Amanda when she smiled and told me I'd always be the one behind the scenes. But I didn't. I stayed. I watched. I waited. I planned. And when the moment came, I acted. Not to destroy her, but to preserve what was mine, what was worth protecting. That's the difference between people like Amanda and me. She fights for recognition. I fight for legacy. She needs to be seen. I need to build something that lasts after I'm gone. And I will. The company recently started a division focused solely on ethical textile production, low-waste manufacturing, fair trade sourcing, and investment in new biodegradable materials. It's the future, and I want Parker & Sons to lead it. Not just because it's good business, but because it's the right thing to do. I've hired a new generation of thinkers, bold, creative, grounded, people who don't care about politics or pedigrees, people who care about impact. I see myself in them sometimes. The fire, the quiet ambition, the need to prove something, not to others, but to themselves. I nurture that fire. I honor it, because someone should have done that for me long ago. And if there's one thing I can give back, it's the support I once had to go without. Legacy isn't built in boardrooms. It's built in whispers, in choices, in quiet revolutions that happen in the hearts of people who refuse to be overlooked. And if you ask me what I'm most proud of, not the awards, not the headlines, not the title on my door, I'll tell you it's this. I stood in the ashes of what they tried to bury me in, and I built something better. That's not just a story of vengeance. That's my story. That's the story of Lily Parker. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people you trusted most? Sometimes the deepest wounds come from within the family, and healing means rising on your own terms. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories of strength, betrayal, and redemption. You never know who might need to hear this today. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't.